All right, we're happy to have Bassem with us today. He has been a speaker with us in the almost a year ago, kind of in the Valley. Your coming brings us good memories about gathering, but this time it is virtually, Bassem. We're happy that Bassem was with us. He's a psychologist and. Aside from his profession, he's a wonderful servant, and he is going to be talking to us about emotional intelligence. Is this correct, yeah, Bassem?
That is correct.
All right. So could you please take it from here?
Okay. Thank you, Abuna, and thank you, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. Um, I'm just going to share my screen for a second. I hope that's okay.
Yep.
Can you guys see the screen?
Yes.
So you see the title, Emotional Intelligence. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So thank you again for this lovely introduction, and thanks for inviting me again. I'm going to assume that inviting me again means that I didn't do a terrible job the first time and that I'm welcome back. But if that's not the case, then I hope that this is my redemption. So again, I hope you guys are all doing well during these difficult times. And yeah, I last time I saw you guys, it was definitely in a very social setting, and it was a lot of fun to see you all seeing each other for the first time in a while. And hopefully these times come back. So I'm going to try to talk for just about maybe 10-15 minutes tops. My hope is to actually, after I give that little spiel, that we go into smaller groups, have some fruitful discussions, and then reconvene where we can sort of share our experiences, ask some questions, and just have really nice discussions. So my goal is to really facilitate moving forward after I kind of give you that little spiel, as I said, and then I just work more as a facilitator as opposed to sort of like an instructor. So I just want to give like a quick bio and a full disclosure. So I have a PhD in health services, and my research really focuses on occupational health and workplace mental health. This has been what I've been doing for the last 8 years or so. So emotional intelligence actually ties quite a bit to what I do. May not be directly, but certainly indirectly. I'm also a professor at the University of Guelph. So I'm currently an adjunct professor, and starting in July, I'll be an assistant professor in the Department of Population Medicine. So the big full disclosure here is, as a psychologist, I work with children and adults. Please note that what I'm offering you here today is not psychological advice. Please do not think that I'm analyzing you, because I don't do that. And that basically this is based on research. Another full disclosure is that I have a big dog who likes to interrupt all my meetings, and she does not seem to understand the concept of confidentiality. I don't know if you guys can see her from here or not. Here, Miley.
Yes. Yes.
This is Miley. She's about 120 pounds, and she has no boundaries. So, but she has really good emotional intelligence, actually, because when I give her the look, she knows that I'm not happy with her. But that doesn't necessarily mean that she does anything with that. Okay, so let's get started. I thought a nice way to break this sort of discussion is by first explaining what intelligence is. So we talk a lot about intelligence, but what does it really mean? Okay, so we always say, oh, this boy or this girl is really intelligent. They're really good at this and that. Oh, they can remember things really well. Or you can say, oh, this person is going to medical school. They must be really intelligent. And we ask ourselves, are they? So, what is really intelligence? What does it mean? So it's one's ability to reason and apply knowledge in different areas of life. Okay, that's not a really good answer, is it? I agree with you. So let's talk a little bit more about intelligence. So intelligence could be what we call fluid or crystallized. So what we mean by fluid is something that's innate. So it's kind of, you're born with it. So the best example that I can offer you is sense of direction. So visual spatial skills, as an example. Thank God for GPS. I get lost anywhere I go. So if it wasn't for a GPS, I don't know where I would be, probably lost. So, but my visual spatial skills are really, really poor. And no matter how much I try to rehearse and practice and all this stuff, it's still something that I'm really struggling with. My wife, on the other hand, Christine, you can put her anywhere and she'll find her way back. She just has that internal compass. She knows how to basically find her way. So she has really good visual spatial skills, and she's an engineer, so that obviously makes sense. Crystallized intelligence, on the other hand, is acquired knowledge. So crystallized intelligence is usually tied with verbal intelligence or verbal reasoning. So people usually actually improve with age with their crystallized intelligence. So their vocabulary and their kind of thesaurus in their head, basically. So these are things that you acquire. So these are forms of intelligence here. Also, abstract versus concrete. So one example of a concrete example is if I were to ask a child, as an example, one of the verbal reasoning tests that we do is, in what way is a pencil and a pen alike? Well, this is really easy. They both are things that I can hold and write with. But if I were to ask, in what way is demand and request alike? Again, for us adults, this might be an easy question. For a child, I don't know. Or they might say they're not alike, because one is to demand and one is to request, right? So again, one is kind of, intelligence can be abstract and it could also be concrete. And as I've alluded to already, is intelligence can be visual or verbal. So this is to say that I know online you can find these IQ tests that people take, and say, oh, if you can answer these 10 questions, your IQ is this and you're a genius and so on. Or if you play these word games on your phone, like word stacks or whatever it's called, if you do well, then you're smarter than Einstein. That's merely one form of intelligence, and it's actually not even a good predictor of intelligence. So again, intelligence, when I do an IQ test, and that's actually a really big part of my job, is there's different parts of intelligence. And putting them together sometimes may give you an overall score, but sometimes these scores can be so scattered that it doesn't really make sense to give an overall score. So basically, intelligence, we can't, so if you right now are having a cough and you want to, are you worried that you have COVID? You're gonna go get a COVID test and it's gonna come out positive or negative. It's very, very objective. There is a tool that you can use, or if you step on a scale, right, assuming it's calibrated and so on, it's going to tell you a measurement, okay? Blood test, same thing. All these things are very, very, like, usually more on the medical side of things. There's a clear, like, objective yes, no, up, down, so on and so forth. But with intelligence, we're now going to what we call psychometrics. We're not sure, because we're kind of, these are constructs. These are things that we developed, and we're using these examples, or we're using these tests to measure something that is a construct. So it's not something that's physically in front of us. So when I ask somebody the question of the pen and the pencil, and the demand and request, these are things that kind of were constructed by person, and we'll say, okay, this is the best estimate of somebody's ability for A, B, or C, right? And what we mean by standardize is that we take these scores and then we standardize them, so we convert them to a meaningful measure, and then we can say this person is like average, above average, or extremely high average, or the other way around, low average, and so on. They're also norm reference, so they're related to where you are. So as an example, it's inappropriate for me to ask an 18-year-old to do a child assessment. And it's also inappropriate, for example, if someone who comes just from Egypt right now, to get them to do the norms of Canadians, because the culture is going to be different. And the questions that I'm going to ask might be really difficult for someone who hasn't lived here to answer these questions. So intelligence is based on a lot of things, but for the most part, it is what we call a construct. And as I kind of alluded to, there's different abilities in someone's intelligence or IQ. They're not always consistent. So I'm really poor visual spatial, but my verbal, I'll probably say, is average or above average, as an example. It's actually not common to find someone who has a flat profile where they're good at everything, okay? Intelligence typically correlates with academic performance. So when we say, oh, this person is intelligent, right, that actually could be because, you know, they're doing well at school, and because they're intelligent, they can achieve, you know, very abstract things like math, for example, not necessarily just calculations, but apply problems and so on. But that's not always the case. In fact, this is something that we're shedding more light on now, especially in our culture, is that someone can be very, very smart or intelligent, but for some reason they're not doing well academically. So this is where kind of a lot of my work is. We kind of detect learning disabilities. So this is when basically someone's IQ is average or above average, but their academic performance is low. So this is kind of, you know, it's not overly prevalent, but something that is important to consider. So now that you have a good introduction to what intelligence is, it would be nice to now dive and delve into what emotional intelligence is. So what is emotional intelligence? It's one's capacity to reason about emotions to enhance thinking. So one's capacity to reason about emotions to enhance thinking. So it's the ability to do the following: perceive and understand. So perceive and understand. So when someone is communicating with you right now, there's verbal stuff, there's also nonverbal stuff, right? There's a lot of emotions in the way that we talk, right? It's what we say and also how we say it, and how we understand and decipher this information as we receive it. It's also our ability to generate emotions, okay? So perceive and understand emotions and generate our own emotions back. Okay, so if you want to have a nice rapport with somebody and they're telling you about something exciting, you're not going to do this. You're probably going to open your eyes, have your eyebrows up, you're showing excitement. Okay, so you're generating emotions back. It's also your ability to regulate emotions. So basically, your ability to being aware of the emotions that you have based on information that you are seeing or hearing or both, and your ability to control these emotions or act on these emotions to act accordingly. Another example of emotional intelligence is one's ability to process emotional information. So how am I dealing with all the stuff that's being presented to me? Okay, so these are kind of some of what is available in the literature. So Mayer and Salvi and Caruso are kind of one of the, I don't know if they're the first, but they're kind of pioneers when it comes to emotional intelligence. I kind of cited later stuff, but they've had this stuff since the early 90s, if not earlier. So what can emotional intelligence help with? Okay. It can help us handle our feelings. Again, think of a very, very sad situation or a really happy situation, or a situation where maybe you don't want to show a lot of emotions, or a situation where it's inappropriate to show a lot of emotions. It actually helps a lot with our ability to be motivated to do things. Okay. So motivating ourselves to get work done. Okay. And with that, it's actually also allowing us to be creative. So if you're facing some form of adversity, so think of, for example, when the COVID-19 sort of started happening and the restrictions happened for the first time and people were basically asked to stay home. How did you deal with that? Were you able to motivate yourself to get work done? Were you motivating yourself to be creative and think outside the box on how you can, example, feel happy still, or to be supportive around the people who are around you, for example? Okay, and of course, being sensitive to others. So these are really big, important pieces about emotional intelligence. Can I be sensitive to other people's needs? Can I read the room and being able to tell if somebody's upset, happy? How can I be helpful towards them? And also how to handle relationships well. Okay, so am I able to kind of have a good give and take with people? Am I able to have people establish trust within me? Am I able to allow people to, I don't know, feel comfortable to reach out to me for things? So this is a really important one in the workplace. If you are, especially if you're a leader, if you're in management, how can you allow your team to feel comfortable to come to you? Okay, so these are really, really important things that we look at. And in the literature, I can talk about this all day. For example, when it comes to leadership and transformational leadership styles and so on. But one of the big things that causes burnout in the workplace, believe it or not, especially in the healthcare field, is when when things happen and there's no debriefing and the supervisor is not doing check-ins to see how you're doing. They feel burnt out because they're saying, you know what, my own employer doesn't care about me, as an example. So this is a really big, important piece to have. As a leader right now, am I checking in on my team to see how they're doing? And is it superficial? Can they tell my sincerity? Would they feel comfortable coming to me if a problem happens? These are all important things to consider. So I'm going to use, if you go on Google right now and you looked up what emotional intelligence is or what the dimensions are, there's lots. And I'm not saying one is right and one is wrong. I'm just using Goleman's dimensions of emotional intelligence. So there are 5, and the first one is called self-awareness. So this one is pretty self-explanatory, but I'll explain it anyway. So it's basically when you say I know what I'm feeling. So when an emotion or something happens, positive, negative, neutral, and so on, you can sort of do that assessment of yourself to know how you're feeling about it. Okay. And also having the confidence, if it's something, for example, negative, that you can overcome it or how you can deal with it. So that's the first dimension of emotional intelligence. The second one is self-regulation. And I find that self-regulation is kind of like the continuation of self-awareness. So I'm aware of how things are, how it's affecting me, and I can tell how I'm feeling and so on and so forth. But am I conscientious on how I'm handling these emotions? Okay. So for example, if you're in a meeting and, for example, the boss or somebody or your husband, wife, or family member or so on say something that's really upsetting, right? Are you able to self-regulate? Are you aware of how you're feeling, and are aware of how you're going to act? And the whole point of self-regulation is to enhance or facilitate a task in mind and not interfere with it. Okay, so again, if you react to something, you might be interfering with a goal that you have in mind. So self-regulation is important. So self-regulation is actually a really big piece, especially for someone who has ADHD, for example. Sometimes they kind of think before, or they act before they think type of thing. So self-regulation is a really important piece. How can I sort of, absorb the information and act appropriately afterwards? Okay. The next one is motivation, which is my ability to move towards a goal. Okay. How can I intrinsically, so from the inside, being able to stay motivated and do what I'm supposed to do? Sorry, I don't know why, but I have a fax machine that I never use and it just rings randomly. It's probably just all these cold calling. So please forgive me for that. It's basically taking the initiative to improve and persevere. So again, I always use COVID as an example of that, is how can you get through the difficult challenges that might be presented to you and motivate yourself to get through it. Empathy. So we talk a lot, in mental health about empathy. So being empathetic or empathic, it's really something that's really important to have, which is inviting yourself to try to sense what that person is feeling. You're not trying to feel what they're feeling per se, but you're trying to see what they're feeling. So if someone is really sad right now, you don't have to feel sad, but you can say, I see that you're sad, right? So being empathic, that must be really, so when somebody tells you something like really bad news, right? And maybe it doesn't affect you, but it affects them. One really good answer is, this must be really difficult for you, right? So you don't have to say, I know how you feel. Sometimes when you say that, it actually might make somebody upset because you're like, I don't think you know how I feel. Or maybe it's not an appropriate thing to say at the time, but saying, wow, that must be really difficult for you. I'm so sorry to hear that. That is telling the person that, wow, I can tell that what the information you just said to me is very, very upsetting. And I can see that it's going to affect you. Okay. And then, of course, we have relationship management. So it's basically the ability to network with people, the ability to interact smoothly with people, the ability to basically handle social situations. So reading the crowd, right? This is very, very important things, whether you are a co-worker, a leader, if you live in a big family, whatever the case is, but being able to read the room and being able to read people's emotions around you is one aspect of relationship management, but also being able to network and kind of starting small talk, right? And this is an important part if you are, looking to start a relationship, for example. Sometimes you're like, this is awkward. I don't know how to to kind of answer or how to speak to somebody. But sometimes the easiest thing is, hey, so I hear that you like, for example, soccer. I do too, right? And just having that smooth conversation with somebody, right? These are really important things that are the dimensions of emotional intelligence. And they're absolutely crucial in our day-to-day stuff. Again, whether you're working or you're at school or you are looking for a relationship, these are very big core pieces that I look forward to the discussion that we're going to have about it. Okay. So let's sort of contrast between intelligence and emotional intelligence. So they're both constructs, okay? Um, they're both things that you cannot just physically measure. We just kind of have questionnaires and things like that that allow us to measure them, okay? IQ is fairly stable to some degree. So as an example, if somebody has an intellectual disability, if you look at this chart here that I have, usually someone with an intellectual disability is in this range, okay? If I test them and they're old enough and they meet the criteria along with other things, I don't need to test them 20 years later and say, I want to make sure that you still have an, intellectual disability. Some cases you need to do that, but for the most part, IQ is stable. IQ is really important for diagnostics. So I said intellectual disabilities, ADHD, learning disabilities, and so on. But emotional intelligence is important in other ways. So one, it can be innate. So it's something that you can kind of be born with from hereditary reasons, as an example, but it also depends on other factors. So you can actually improve your emotional intelligence. And this takes time. So I actually find, and this is probably purely anecdotal, is that because of the world that we live in, whether it's pandemic or not, um, we're heavily basically dependent on electronics. So having that face to face is becoming like a scarcity in a way. So the younger generations, their social skills may not be as strong, so their emotional intelligence may not be there. So as an example, just making eye contact with somebody when they're talking. Can you imagine you're talking about something really upsetting and the person in front of you is not even looking at you or doing something else? That is emotional intelligence. Are you being aware of are you self-aware and how you're being perceived? So this is an important piece. So it can be depending on electronics. It could be also on depending on positive things. So if you, for example, are in a family where good communication is really important, or you've had mentors where they're really good leaders in the workplace or at school, and they were able to basically mirror what good emotional intelligence is like without actually labeling it as that, right? But sometimes, and actually some occupations, they take you through courses that are very much involved with emotional intelligence. And I'll give you the best example right away, which is your satellite provider, your cable provider, your internet provider, any of these people. How many of you have had some sort of disruption in your phone, internet, or cable once upon a time and you had to call? And you're usually calling and you're saying, nope, I don't even want to talk to the representative. I want to talk straight to the manager because I'm very important and I need this fixed immediately, right? And what do they say? You'll find that they hardly ever say, oh, absolutely not, you were wrong, you didn't set up your internet correctly, or you did something wrong. They're going to do the actual opposite of that. What they're going to tell you is, wow, I can tell that you're really frustrating. If this happened to me, I'd be very frustrated too. I can see that this is very important to you. Okay. And then once they say that, what do? You usually stay quiet because you're like, yeah, this person heard what I said and they actually feel, or they're being empathic or empathetic towards me, right? Or you're saying, yeah, right, you got it, right? So that's coached, right? So emotional intelligence, it could be very much a script, but after a while, when you see how people respond to the way that you say things, or even the way non-verbally you do things, it becomes something that you now add into your way of communication. Okay, so I always use that example. When you call the internet or whatever and you're frustrated, they never say you're wrong. They're actually going to say, oh, that must be really difficult, I'm sorry to hear that. Okay, so they're absorbing that negative energy, and they're allowing you to share your frustration, and they're telling you, listen, this sucks, and let's see if we can work on it together. Okay. Another one too, I always give this example, especially not to criticize the Coptic community or Egyptian community, because we're becoming more of dog lovers as we go. But I always say this example to really bring the point across, which is, if I were to sit right now with somebody and I'm very upset, and I say my dog just died. Okay. Someone with high emotional intelligence isn't going to look for the solution, at least not right away. They're going to sit there and focus on the emotion involved. So one example, and I've tested this a lot of times, no one here in this chat room, but I would say, oh, my dog died. And they say, oh, that must be difficult, right? Some would say that, but a lot of them would say, Malish, you can get another dog, right? They go straight to problem solving, right? So right away, they're dismissing how you're feeling. So the emotional intelligence there, are you self-aware? Are you able to regulate that? Or are you jumping straight to solving the problem? Also, are you able to read the person in front of you? They're not trying to get you to solve their problem. They're telling you that they're sad about something. Or when you can say, you know what, I just had this long-term relationship and it just ended. What's a good friend going to say? You'll be out there again. There's plenty of fish in the sea. They mean well. They're not trying to cause any harm. In fact, they're trying to get you to that point where you may not be there. But, someone with high emotional intelligence, and I'm not saying people who are close to you don't have that, but the people who are close to you often don't want to see you sad, so they want to skip a few steps, right? But the important thing here is saying, oh my goodness, that must be really difficult for you. How are you doing? How are you dealing with that? Right? So you're sitting with the emotion as opposed to jumping to the solution. Sometimes when someone is saying something to you, being so self-aware of what's being said and how it's being said, they may not be looking for a solution. They may be looking for just someone hearing them. And it's actually very therapeutic sometimes when someone is upset to say something out loud, just get something off their chest. So it's their way of processing things. And hearing someone who's empathic or empathetic, which is a huge part of emotional intelligence, and having that give and take, so that relationship building or relationship management, is really, really critical. So that is basically my presentation. Again, as I said, I wanted to keep it as short as possible. And what I want you to do right now in your groups, and I ask Abuna or Marina if you can help me with this, we're going to break you into smaller groups where you will be basically talking on how you think emotional intelligence or the implications of emotional intelligence are in our relationship. So this could be romantic or non-romantic, in our work, and also as Christians. So this is a piece that I haven't mentioned yet, and kind of the strategic. So it really gets you to be creative, and also be motivated to think of solutions. And you notice I'm using keywords from the earlier presentations. So I will stop talking here, and I will leave it to Abuna and Marina to do the next part.
Thank you so much, Bassem. This was like an amazing talk so far. I think Aki will be creating the breakout rooms, and we'll be able to discuss a little bit more about emotional intelligence. And then we'll regroup back in the main session afterwards.
Yeah, Bassem, if I can just ask, how big of a group do you want? We've got 25, got 24 people. How big or how small do you want the groups to be?
I guess maybe groups of 6. Just as long as you can kind of, so it's not too small, so we have like 10 groups. So yeah, I think like maybe groups of 4, groups of 6 would be good. And everyone will kind of talk about, I invite people to just talk about, you can talk about one of those 3, or you can talk about all 3. Actually, maybe talk about all 3 just so people don't choose just the one or the other and the others get neglected. But share experiences, share why you think, you know, emotional intelligence is important or it's not important. I won't be offended if you don't find emotional intelligence something that's important, but it's just a really nice way to generate discussions, and then we come back and then we share them together. So maybe one person from each group can sort of bring, you know, their main findings and so on.
And how long do you want? Like 10 minutes, 15 minutes?
Sure.
Okay, خلاص. Okay, here we go. So I'll give you
Would
guys.
you like to assign like one of those like domains to one group or the other, or would you like them to do all 3? I'm very flexible.
Whatever you like, whatever you think is.
I'll let you decide because I really have no preference.
I'm gonna break out the rooms. It's up to you. How about, you know what? Here, we'll do this. So just to make sure that everyone's getting something, we're not duplicating the efforts. Okay. Room 1, you're gonna do relationships. Room 2, you're gonna do work, and room 3 as Christians, and then room 4, we'll leave it up to you to decide which one you want to do. Okay. Cool. All right, I'm going to create the rooms right now. All right, here we go. It's 8:40. We'll reconnect at 8:15, 10 minutes.
Great.